So Powder Room was born out of the need to look at fashion, and not just the industry but how India consumes fashion from a purely journalistic perspective. And my experience till then as a journalist, both formally with India Today and then as editor of Marie Claire, revealed to me that journalists were, if at all they were looking at fashion, they were only deconstructing the parties, not even deconstructing them. They were looking at it as a partying, celebratory field where everybody seemed ostensibly happy, or everybody was clinking glasses, and there was this purple haze, as I said in my session as well, about models, drugs, gay designers and all that. And what was deflecting down and seeping down was this perceived notion of fashion, and it seemed to reveal to me that it had the nuances that any other story would have. So there should be an attempt to look at fashion and people who consume fashion and their stories, just as we would bring journalistic inquiry into anything. I have always been very influenced by long form journalism, by the New Yorker Profile, by Granta as a magazine of new writing, where you take one person or one story and then delve deeply into it, cutting in and out, digressing to bring in relevant bits, but then coming back to the same person. So that's how Powder Room was, that was the essential narrative, and I started pursuing stories with the hope that in the end I will have 10 or 12 stories that reveal 10 or 12 facets of fashion, but bring up a different subject. So I have a story on models, I have a story on Nagaland. I went to Ludhiana to understand the kitty party culture, where housewives turn out almost every afternoon dressed from head to toe in brands. I looked at the only family in the whole of India. There's one family that weaves the Patan Patola sari, that one sari takes 6 months to weave if 6 people work on it for 6 months. It's a long drawn, sometimes it takes 8 months, 4 months. The Salvi family is, their ancestors were 11th century weavers. Now this one family weaves this particular kind of sari. I wanted to go and spend time with them. I've seen the story through their youngest weaver who quit a full-time job as an architect to become a weaver because he felt that nobody wanted to do weaving in his family. So I was deconstructing fashion, and my attempt was to let the stereotype stay. I mean, the stereotype is fashion, but also reveal beyond the stereotype. So I chose a mix of gay designers and drugged out models and this and that, and yet tried to look at completely unspoken or undiscovered stories that hinted at how India was consuming fashion. So what it turned out to be is a look at contemporary society, contemporary India, but through the sieve of fashion and clothing. You see, fashion by itself is defined as something that changes. It changes with seasons, it must change every season. There is fall, winter and summer, spring, summer. This is the technical definition of fashion. That's trendy, that keeps up, that leaps ahead of each of us. None of us can keep up with fashion because it's always ahead of us, as it's changing so rapidly. The way I used it in my book is this wishfulness of trendiness, wanting to be trendy, wanting to be the consumer of designer garments, wanting to be a part of the glamour brigade by participating in through consumption. Fashion is a term that has, splashed. It's like a cloudburst in India at the moment. It has splashed various nuances. So you see a tailor in Anjar in Kutch called designer tailors. Now designer tailors by itself doesn't mean anything, because you are either designers or tailors, or designers are tailors themselves. You go to Banaras and you have this army of dress forms, mannequins standing, dressed in odd kinds of lehengas or leggings and all that, ostensibly trendy. Then there is the really top-notch fashion designer like Rohit Bal, Tarun Telyani, Sabyasachi Mukherjee, who are giving form to the wish lists of the moneyed and the wealthy class, who must distinguish themselves by the ways of consumption. Fashion also, like luxury itself, helps distinguish your consumption pattern. So it's not good enough to buy a Marks and Spencer t-shirt or a Wills t-shirt you must go and buy a designer pair of t-shirt, you must go get something which is not even Lacoste, it is made to order. So fashion is a form of distinction. I have seen it as trendiness and distinction and a consumption pattern, and then tried to explore how it influences behavior, how it influences relationships, how it influences the choices we make in life. To give you an instance, I have a chapter in my book on a girl from a not very privileged family, but an educated family, a lower middle class girl living in East Delhi, who was chosen, who was hired to work as a sales girl for a luxury brand. When luxury brands hire people, they look for educated people and then they groom them. Now this grooming really makes everything. They tell you how to polish your nails, which undergarments to wear to look nice. Your undergarments are not revealed, but it's about how much you care for yourself. Which size of shirt do you wear, not sloppy, how to walk, how to talk. They extensively groom them to the extent that if it's an Italian brand, a trainer will show you the entire landscape and the countryside of Florence to say, this is where this brand is made, you know, this is where a Bottega Veneta or a Gucci is created. This is the Italian countryside. When you take a train from Milan to Florence, this is what you see on the road. They are asked to see Google Maps, they are asked to spell out certain names, and if it's Louis Vuitton, then you are told how Louis Vuitton came out. You know, you are given a brand DNA deconstruction, and the whole person starts changing. And I followed the story of this girl whose name has been changed in the book because she could have lost her job. She was a Christian girl and she's called Jennifer in my book. I chased Jennifer's story for a long time, and what I found was that her personal life had changed. She started not liking her boyfriend because he was scruffy. He worked in an LG showroom. He shared his comb, and she was being taught ways of grooming. Private life, privacy became an important thing for her. She was getting used to the scented loos and washrooms of Emporio Mall in Delhi. And when she went home, she had to do the Balti Snan, and she told her mother that I don't want a bucket and a pail, you have to get me a shower, and you can use my salary to get us a shower. So you see, it really impacts what you choose to do, impacts your relationships and your career. And that's what this book unravels. So I've seen the whole chapter of the entry of luxury brands in India through Jennifer's eyes. She is my Sutradhar while I look at the entry of Louis Vuitton, of Gucci, of Christian Dior, and a whole Louboutin and other brands that we started consuming, digressing in and out from what the brands were doing, how they were courting the moneyed class, the rich, the closet spenders like politicians and bureaucrats who don't announce their consumption, but it's there. And so I needed a Sutradhar, but I digress out of the story. I visit people who own brands. I have met people, representatives of luxury brands, who told me why they sell in India and how they do, why SRK was poached from Omega to Tag Heuer, you know, to break into the whole buyership. So, and then I come back to Jennifer and how her relationship starts disintegrating when the film Aisha was being shot in Emporio Mall. So that's what Powder Room is really about. It is just that the ways of spending and the ways of distinction are different, but they are different only by being same. They are only relatively different. But the tailor that I met, who lives and works from Nadiad in Gujarat, she's a ladies tailor and she creates Don 2 cholis, and I ask her, why Don 2 cholis? Who wears cholis in Don 2? She says, I don't know, and why should I know? It's just because a new film is releasing, my cholis have to be called something else so that I can hike 15 rupees more on this. So with every new film she would have a choli named after that, regardless of what people were wearing, and the aspect that, you know, somehow my clientele should connect with the glamour world. And what does a housewife living in a suburb of Chennai or a suburb of Delhi do? She wants to look like the glamour person. The glamour person wants to look like a Hollywood glamour person. It's a chain of wanting to buy, wanting to look distinctive. Eventually people start cloning each other consciously or unconsciously, they become clones of each other because they are repeating a similar wish list. And so while some of them are inverse snobs like me and I wear a textile sari, I am still doing the same thing because I am spending to distinguish myself. And so I see a similarity, a deep connect. Officially, fashion began in India about 25 years back when when the first fashion store was founded in the fort area of Bombay called Ensemble. Day after tomorrow is its 25th anniversary, 12/12/12, it completes 25 years. Fashion officially arrived, but Ritu Kumar, the matriarch of Indian fashion, was working as the barefoot doctor of craft and textile revival in the early 70s. She was working in previously colonized villages around Bengal and looking at embroideries and so on and so forth. Then came the 90s when fashion started being shown on fashion ramps, where only mills would have fashion shows or Ensemble, the store, would have it. In the 2000s is when fashion became business, and that's when I think we have to pin it down, because 2001 formally Fashion Week started in India. Fashion Week is a business event. It brings together a clutch of designers who are selling to retail, who are selling to outlets, saying that we would sell in 15 cities in India or wherever buyers come from, and perhaps 15 retail destinations abroad. So when Fashion Week started, fashion really started being bought. And I have pinned down in my own head as a researcher and observer, writer of popular culture, I see the last decade, the 2000s, 2000 to 2010, the divorce decade and the dressing up decade of India. There was a boom. It was also because brands entered our country. We were not just buying Adidas and Nike and so forth, but we had a lot of choice, which began sometime from Benetton, and then today we can walk into an Armani showroom and buy ourselves an Armani shirt. So the entry of brands, the opening up of Indian salaries, the post-liberalization boom, you know, the pre-recession years were really prosperous years. So there was a fashion consumption boom then. Do I see it filtering down to the rural areas? No. But what filters down is a caricature of fashion. For instance, Surat, where the mills are, and where the polyester sarees used to be made, now produce factory bling. So you have the bling, the Salma sitaras and the sequins and the embellishments, a kind of a reproduction of the terrible designer saree produced from Surat factories. So if you go into any of the rural belts, you will see all the women sitting on the back seat of motorcycles or herded into buses and all that, suddenly wearing factory bling. And they have red lipsticks, and they are also wearing you know, blue nail polish of even if it's chipped, and anklets and buckles here and 5 kinds of bangles. There is a muchness going on in the rural area because everything has suddenly shifted down and filtered down. So while the rich are getting exhausted to distinguish themselves and saying classiness is about not wearing too much, it's about just holding one branded watch and nothing else, the rural is too much. You know, India rural is so poor that we should not even have the illusion of thinking that they are influenced by fashion. But let's say the working classes to some extent in tier 3, tier 4, even tier 5 cities are indeed influenced by fashion, by matching too much, by carrying bags when they don't need, by dressing up their daughters and their sons in jeans which have 5 kinds of pockets and patchwork on them. So there is a trickle down of fashion. Fashion always trickles down. All the stories are of change. Whether the change is of the extremely rich Ludhiana housewife who does not want to be seen dead in a suit, a salwar kameez, which is called the Punjabi in the south and Gujarat, is called a suit in Punjab. She doesn't want to be seen in her home garment at all. She wants to be seen in a Gucci and an Armani. Yet she chooses male fetuses. When I visited the gynecologist and asked if there is sex selection of fetuses happening in this town, and she said it's rampant and it is these rich classes who want sons. So she wears luxury brands from head to toe and goes and selects the male fetus, and then there is the lady's tailor who is divorced twice, who goes through transformation. So women have wanted to look beautiful is the skin of fashion. Fashion is not just the skin. What changes is something changes inside you, and then everything changes. In the multiplicity of the change that is going on, our dressing is also changing. And this is tangible, this is available to our eyes. So we see more girls wearing dresses, more people wearing less clothes or more clothes or dressier clothes. That's the tangible aspect of change, but really it's about liberation, and if I may say so, to some extent about women's liberation. And fashion is the tangible, available aspect of seeing, yes, she has changed. What has also changed is something else: relationships, dealing with it, sexuality, morality, you know, multiple changes reflecting enormously in clothes and choice of clothes. I just wanted to say that there is a chapter in the book on fashion media, and where I have tried to stress why the fashion media needs to be as objective and move away from the incestuousness it currently shares with sponsors, advertisers, designers, glamour people and all that. So they are not able to distinguish themselves as writers or as objective chroniclers and say that I cannot have a drink tonight with Arvind Kejriwal and tomorrow praise India against corruption. That drink is not available to me, or that intimacy is not available to me because I am a journalist and I will stay away from my subject. In fashion, there is nothing like staying away from my subject. Designers and journalists and sponsors and advertisers constantly woo each other, and then that's why there is very little real chronicling of the fashion industry, very little reviewing, very little engagement with what is actually fascinating and it's going on. So there is a chapter that kind of deals with the complications around the fashion media and why there are these revolving doors, and perhaps they want to go away. And I have a chapter from Nagaland. Not too many people have explored Nagaland, there is a story there of a young Naga designer who suffers from bipolar disorder. There is his real name, and I have used his bipolarity. It's a very sad story actually, but I have used his bipolarity to also trace the metaphor of bipolarity between Nagaland and mainland being this. So these deconstructs are there in the book, and they offer a lot of complicated tapestry. 2 years start to finish, from starting the book to it being released, it being given to the editor, and I spent 1 year interviewing people.